I'm going to share with you about the wilderness I recently went through and how God has used this wilderness to show himself to me and to others. It is still really raw emotion for me right now, and so I apologize in advance if I cry. I'd like to start by telling you what my life was like before I went through the wilderness. I was very active, working as an assistant for one of the owners of the largest real estate company in New Mexico. I'm married to a wonderful man, and we have 2 beautiful children, grown daughters. I've got a cute little chubby chihuahua named Angus that I'm pretty crazy about too. I was very active, and I ran every morning before work, and I participated in the Duke City 90-day challenges pretty much year-round. I had trained and ran a half marathon. I was in the best shape of my life. Then I began having some symptoms that I kept ignoring and writing them off to different things. I kept telling myself, you're just stressed. You're just tired. But then it got to the point I couldn't ignore it anymore. I couldn't even climb the stairs in my home anymore without losing my breath. So at my husband's insistence, I went to my doctor and he drew some blood, and I thought for sure he was going to say I was just anemic. He said he would call me and let me know once he had the results. The next day, on September 24th, 2014, I was sitting at my desk at work, and I received the call from my doctor. I was told I had acute leukemia, and I needed to get to the hospital right away. Suddenly, I went from my happy, busy life to entering the wilderness. It's strange how the mind works. Here I was facing the worst day of my entire life, and all I could think of is I need to cancel my hair appointment because I'm not going to have any hair. I went from that to I don't want to die. Am I going to die? I don't want to die. Fear immediately tried to take me down. The devil started throwing these fiery darts. Did you know that fear not is in the Bible 365 times? Once for every day of the year. Well, I found I needed to hear this every 5 minutes. I remember saying 2 Timothy 1 over and over again. God has not given me a spirit of fear, but power, love, and a sound mind. Actually, this was my first post on Facebook after my diagnosis. Once I had my first bone biopsy, I was told that I had a 95% chance of going into remission after the first round of chemo. Well, this was great news. I just knew I was going to be the 95%. They immediately started me on very powerful high-dose chemo that made me very sick. Well, it didn't take long to find out I hadn't gone into remission after the first round of chemo, like the 95%. So obviously, I was the 5%. So began the roller coaster ride. I would get bad news, and later God would turn that into something good. My boss's wife came to see me one day and brought me the Jesus Calling book. This book has been so encouraging for me. I would read it every morning, and if I couldn't read it, whoever was with me would read it to me. God really spoke to me through this little book, and I'm going to read you the day that my boss's wife brought it to me, and it's just like so fitting. It was October 14th. Be prepared to suffer for me. In my name, all suffering has meaning in my kingdom. Pain and problems are opportunities to demonstrate your trust in me, bearing your circumstances bravely, even thanking me for them, is one of the highest forms of praise. This sacrifice of thanksgiving rings golden tone bells of joy throughout heavenly realms. On earth also, your patient suffering sends out ripples of good tidings to ever-widening circles. When suffering strikes, remember that I am sovereign and that I can bring good out of everything. Do not try to run from pain or hide from problems. Instead, accept adversity in my name, offering it up to me for my purposes. Thus, your suffering gains meaning and draws you closer to me. Joy emerges from the aches of adversity through your trust and thankfulness. Isn't that fitting? I remember this during this time, just crying out to God and asking Him to forgive me for all the times I complained about my life, for all the times I complained about my job. Anything I could think of, I asked God to forgive me. I was sort of negotiating with Him. God began to speak to me through other people and through His Word and through this Jesus Calling book. It became obvious He wanted me to look for and see Him working through the illness. One evening I began running a very high fever and needed my blood drawn and a chest x-ray done. I immediately sent a text to my sister Glenna to come to the hospital right away. A young lady from the lab came into my room and began drawing my blood at the same time Glenna arrived to pray for me. As Glenna prayed, this young lab tech began to cry. I asked her what was wrong. She began to tell me that she had been very mad at God for a long time because her entire family were drug addicts and had become estranged from her and wouldn't let her see her little sister who had cancer. I told her that I couldn't imagine going through this without my sisters. I told her not to be mad at God, to ask Him to help her little sister. I told her you can pray if your little sister is with you or not. I saw this same lab tech several times throughout my stay at Press. She told me she wasn't mad at God anymore and was going to get to see her little sister. There was also another time I saw God working around that time. Our dear friend and neighbor for many years ended up 2 doors down from me in the hospital. He had just been diagnosed with pancreatic and liver cancer. His entire family was so distraught. This was during a quarantine time for me, so I could not comfort them or see them. But my sister Glenna went out into the hall and prayed with the daughter, who was especially distraught over her dad's diagnosis. Unfortunately, he died shortly after that, and just weeks later, his daughter died unexpectedly. I know this wasn't a coincidence, that he would end up my neighbor again in the hospital. I am so grateful for Glenna and that she got the opportunity to talk with the daughter and pray for her. After spending 2 months at Press Hospital and more bone biopsies that showed I still had leukemia, my oncologist told me they couldn't do anything more for me here. I would have to go out of state to get more treatment. So I went to Mayo Clinic in Phoenix, and I immediately felt God had sent me there to be healed. The oncologist that would become my new doctor sat down with my family and me, and she told us the only chance for a cure was a stem cell transplant. And even with a stem cell transplant, there was only an 11% chance for a cure. I thought about it a minute and I said, well, God can do a lot with 11%. There was a sweet nurse named Bridget who greeted me as I was admitted into the hospital room. Throughout my hospitalization, Bridget would pray for me and wrote me notes of encouragement. She even came and visited me when I was moved around the hospital. She was an angel sent from God. Bridget was just one of many nurses that went above and beyond for me while I was at Mayo. One nurse was also a Christian singer, and she sent me songs that she sang. Another nurse knitted me a pink hat for my little bald head. Those